It was past midnight when Eleanor heard the knock. A slow, deliberate sound, echoing through the stone halls of her husband's manor. Her heart leapt in her chest, for she knew Lord Thomas, her husband, slept heavy beside her. No visitor would dare arrive at such an hour, not in a village where darkness brought whispers of spirits and thieves. She held her breath, staring into the black of the chamber. The knock came again, 3 times, steady as a heartbeat. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid thump beneath her fingers. Her mind raced. Who could it be? A messenger? A thief? Or, God forbid, an enemy of Thomas? She slipped from the bed, bare feet cold on the stone floor, and crept to the door. The hallway smelled of wax and dust, the air thick with the chill of the night. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she loosened the latch just enough to peer out. A shadow stood in the moonlight, and she recognized him immediately. William, the young mason her husband had hired to repair the chapel wall. His cloak was drawn tight, his eyes glinting with an intensity that made Eleanor's stomach twist. "I had to see you," he whispered, his voice a soft tremor against the silence. "I cannot sleep for thinking of you." Eleanor's mind froze. She knew the danger. Any hint of this encounter could destroy her. Yet, a strange thrill coursed through her veins. She leaned closer to the door, letting the moonlight fall across her face, hiding her fear behind a small, nervous smile. A single candle flickered in the hallway, casting a long shadow that seemed to sway with her heartbeat. The night outside was still, almost holding its breath, as if it knew a choice was about to be made. Eleanor swallowed hard and whispered back, almost to herself, "Come in," but quietly. And just like that, the night shifted. Something dangerous, something thrilling had begun. William stepped inside, closing the door with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot in Eleanor's chest. The candlelight painted his sharp features in gold and shadow, and Eleanor felt her pulse race with a mixture of fear and forbidden desire. "Why here? Why now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "If Thomas wakes." "Thomas will not wake," William said, stepping closer, his hand brushing hers as he passed. "The manor sleeps, but I cannot. I had to see you, to speak with you, if only for a moment." Eleanor's mind reeled. She was the lady of the manor, bound to her husband by vows and duty. Yet here was a man who made her heart ache and her body yearn. She hated herself for it, yet the thrill coursed through her veins like fire. They moved to a shadowed corner of the room, where moonlight pooled softly on the stone floor. Eleanor's fingers twined nervously in her skirts. "You must not," she began, but William silenced her with a look. "Eleanor," he said, voice low and urgent, "I cannot stop thinking of you. I cannot eat. I cannot sleep. I would risk anything for a moment with you." The words wrapped around her like a silken rope, pulling her closer to danger. She thought of Thomas, lying in the next room, a man who had been kind enough but dull, a man she no longer desired. And she thought of the village, where a whisper of betrayal could ruin her forever. Yet she could not turn him away. Not tonight. Not ever. As William leaned closer, brushing a lock of hair from her face, the candle flickered violently. A cold draft whispered through the room, as if the night itself warned her of the peril she courted. Eleanor closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them to meet his gaze, surrendering to a desire that might one day destroy them both. And in that moment, a single creak from the hallway made her heart leap. Someone or something was watching. Dawn broke with a pale, timid light, slipping through the tall windows of the manor. Eleanor rose from her bed, heart still racing from the night's secret, and moved to the wash basin. The cold water bit at her skin, but it could not wash away the memory of William's touch, the way his eyes had burned into hers in the darkness. She dressed carefully in a gown of green velvet, brushing her hair until it gleamed like autumn leaves in the morning sun. Every movement was precise, measured. Her husband must never suspect the storm raging behind her composed face. Eleanor's life was a careful performance, each day a mask she wore to hide the truth. She was no longer just a lady of the manor. She was a woman ensnared by a dangerous passion. The servants bustled around her, whispering about the crops, the markets, and the neighbors' gossip. Eleanor nodded, smiled, even laughed when expected. But her mind wandered constantly to William, the way he had waited for her, the way he had risked everything for a single stolen hour. She walked through the stone halls to the great hall, where Thomas was already seated, reading letters by the morning light. His expression was calm, untroubled. Eleanor forced a smile. "Good morning, my lord," she said, her voice steady. "Good morning, Eleanor," Thomas replied, his eyes scanning her face for a hint of mood. But he saw nothing unusual, just the polite, obedient wife he expected. After breakfast, Eleanor retreated to her private chambers, pretending to embroider while her thoughts raced. The memory of William's whispered promises lingered like smoke in her mind, and a new thought gnawed at her. She wanted more than stolen moments. She wanted danger, desire, and freedom, even if it could ruin her. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the room. Eleanor looked up and froze. A messenger, dressed in the village livery, bowed low. "Lady Eleanor, a man asks for you at the garden gate. He says it cannot wait." Her heart lurched. She knew, even before she saw him, who it would be. William. And yet, the risk was greater now. One false step, one watchful eye, and the fragile world she had built could crumble like the manor's old stone walls. Eleanor rose, smoothing her dress and gripping the edge of the table. Her lips parted in a breathless whisper. "I cannot, not again." But the night had already begun to claim her. The garden was cloaked in early morning mist, silver threads weaving between the hedges and statues. Eleanor slipped through the side gate, her heart pounding as if it would betray her with every beat. William stood beneath the old oak, his hands buried in his cloak, eyes searching until they met hers. "Eleanor," he breathed. "You came." "I had to," she whispered, stepping closer, careful to keep the sound of her skirts soft against the gravel path. "It's too dangerous. Someone could see us." "I do not care," William said, his voice firm yet tender. "If the world falls for this moment, then let it fall. I cannot live without seeing you." She shivered, torn between reason and the forbidden thrill of his words. In the garden, time seemed to bend around them. The roses were heavy with dew, the fountains murmured secrets, and the birds had not yet dared to sing. Eleanor felt the heat of desire mingle with fear, a dangerous elixir that made her limbs tremble. They moved together to a shadowed alcove, hidden by climbing ivy. William brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering too long, and Eleanor felt a gasp rise in her throat. She tried to pull back, reminding herself of Thomas, of the world outside the stolen sanctuary. But her body betrayed her, leaning into him instead. "We should not," she began, voice tight. But William silenced her with a look that held more intensity than any command. "Do you ever feel alive, Eleanor? Truly alive?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. She swallowed hard, realizing she had not felt truly alive for years, trapped in silk and stone, bound by duty. And yet here, in the misted garden, with danger and desire intertwined, she felt a spark of something reckless, something intoxicating. Suddenly, a noise cracked through the morning air. A branch snapping, sharp and deliberate. Eleanor's heart froze. She pulled back, eyes wide, scanning the mist. "Who?" she began. William's hand caught hers. "No one," he whispered. "It's the wind. Only the wind." But Eleanor knew, in that instant, that the garden held secrets beyond their own. Someone, or something, had watched them, and the price of their passion might be closer than she dared imagine. Back in the manor, Eleanor forced herself to move as if nothing had happened. She laughed at Thomas's jokes, sipped her morning tea, and answered his questions with the calm poise of a lady who bore no secrets. But beneath that mask, her mind spun like a loom, weaving a web of lies so intricate it frightened her. She could not allow Thomas to sense her restlessness, her longing, or the flushed glow still clinging to her cheeks from the garden. Every glance, every gesture had to be measured, rehearsed. Eleanor understood that in their world, betrayal was not merely frowned upon. It could be punished with ruin, exile, or death. During the day, she busied herself with the household. She oversaw the servants, arranged the larders, and inspected the stables, all while counting the hours until she could steal away to William once more. Each task, each conversation, required careful thought. What could be said? What must be silenced? What questions might reveal her secret? Yet the more she tried to maintain control, the more the lie gnawed at her. Every letter she received from William was hidden beneath her mattress, each word burning hotter than the last. Their love, forbidden and reckless, became a shadow over every moment of her life. She laughed with Thomas, dined with him, and yet in her chest beat a heart that belonged to another. That evening, Eleanor found herself staring out the window of her chamber, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky was streaked with crimson, like the blood she feared might one day spill if their secret were discovered. A bird called in the distance, sharp and urgent, as if warning her that danger lurked just beyond the manor walls. She touched the letter hidden beneath her pillow, fingers trembling. "One more night," she whispered. "One more stolen moment, and then—" But deep down, Eleanor knew there might never be a then. The walls of lies were closing around her, and the slightest misstep could shatter everything. A shadow passed her window. She froze. Outside, the courtyard was empty, or so it seemed. Yet in her heart, Eleanor felt eyes watching, waiting for the moment she might falter. That night, Eleanor slipped once more into the garden, heart thundering with both excitement and terror. The moon hung low, casting pale light over the hedges, and the air smelled of damp earth and roses. William waited, as always, beneath the old oak, his eyes lighting up the moment he saw her. "I thought you might not come," he whispered, stepping closer. "I had to," she replied, voice barely audible, her hands trembling as they brushed together. Every moment apart feels like a lifetime. They moved to the hidden alcove, their secret world. Here, the rules of the manor, the village, and duty no longer existed. Eleanor let herself fall into William's arms, letting desire and fear intertwine until she could scarcely remember caution. But passion, Eleanor knew, was never safe. That night, as William leaned close, a rustling came from the hedges, a subtle, almost imperceptible sound. Eleanor froze, a chill crawling up her spine. "Someone's there," she whispered. William placed a finger on her lips. "It is only the wind," he said, though his eyes darted toward the darkness. They stayed a moment longer, stolen and trembling, but the whisper of danger could not be ignored. Eleanor's mind raced. What if someone sees? What if Thomas, or worse, the villagers? And then, a shadow moved closer, darker than the night itself, beyond the veil of mist. Eleanor gasped, her hand clutching William's arm. "We must leave," she said urgently. They ran through the garden, skirts tangling, hearts pounding in unison, until the manor doors swallowed them into safety. Behind them, Eleanor could still feel eyes on her, watching, waiting, judging. Inside her chamber, she locked the door and sank to the floor, breath ragged, body trembling. The thrill of the affair burned in her veins, but fear now ran beside it, coiled and sharp. Eleanor realized, with a shiver, that desire could be deadly, and that someone, somewhere, might already know their secret. Days passed like fragile glass, each one heavier than the last. Eleanor moved through the manor with practiced ease, but a shadow of unease followed her everywhere. She began noticing things she had once ignored. A servant glancing too long at her when she passed, the way Thomas lingered a moment too long in the doorway, his eyes searching. One evening, as she carried a tray of wine to the great hall, a hushed voice drifted from the servants' quarters. "She spends far too long in the garden at night," said one maid. "She is not alone," another replied, in a whisper just low enough that Eleanor caught it only with the sharpest of attention. Eleanor's stomach turned to ice. How much do they know? She wondered, setting down the tray with trembling hands. Every step, every smile, every word she had spoken now seemed a potential trap. Thomas himself grew distant in the days that followed, polite but cold, as if he sensed something was wrong but could not name it. Eleanor hated the fear that gnawed at her, yet she hated herself even more for loving William with a passion that made her reckless. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her chamber. The shadows seemed alive, stretching toward her, reminding her that the walls of her life were closing in. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the rapid thump of a heart that belonged to another. Suddenly, there was a soft knock at the window. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She crept forward, heart hammering, and found William waiting outside, cloak dark against the moonlight, eyes alive with a dangerous fire. "Come quickly," he whispered. "I cannot wait any longer." Eleanor's lips trembled as she glanced back toward the manor. The hallways were silent, but the knowledge of watchers, of whispers, made her skin prickle. Every step she took toward him was a step closer to ruin, yet she could not resist. And so she climbed out into the night, feeling the thrill and the peril entwined, knowing that each stolen moment was a dance on the edge of a blade. Eleanor and William met in the moonlit meadow beyond the manor walls, where wildflowers bent under the night breeze. The air was sweet with their scent, but Eleanor's heart was heavy with fear. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bark of a dog reminded her that discovery was always close. "I cannot bear it," William whispered, holding her hands tightly. "I must see you, even if the world falls apart." Eleanor pressed her forehead to his, the warmth of his breath mingling with her own. "I know. I feel the same," she admitted, voice low. "But we tread a dangerous path. If Thomas or anyone finds out." William's gaze hardened. "Let them find out. I will face them, Eleanor. But you," his eyes softened, "you must be careful. You are everything to me." She shivered, torn between the desperate desire she could no longer deny and the creeping dread of her precarious position. Every stolen meeting, every secret touch, carried weight far greater than she had ever imagined. The night deepened, shadows growing thick around them, and Eleanor realized something. Someone had been following her, tracking her movements. She had noticed it before, the fleeting shadow, the eyes in the dark, but had dismissed it as paranoia. Now she was certain. "We cannot stay long," she said urgently. "Someone watches us." William frowned, scanning the darkness. "Then we must move faster, or risk everything." They turned toward the forest's edge, the tall trees swallowing them in darkness. Eleanor's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. Her heart pounded with exhilaration and fear, each step a gamble that might cost her life, her honor, or both. As they vanished into the night, Eleanor felt a cold finger of dread curl around her heart. The thrill of their love had always come with danger, but now the danger was no longer distant. It was close, tangible, and merciless. And she knew, deep in her bones, that the first misstep would not merely ruin her. It could destroy them both. The following day, Eleanor could barely eat. Every creak of the manor, every whispered footstep in the hall made her flinch. She kept her eyes low, her smile measured, yet her mind replayed the previous night over and over. William's hand in hers, the shadows in the meadow, the feeling of eyes on them. That afternoon, a messenger arrived, breathless and wide-eyed. "Lady Eleanor, a man from the village insists he must speak with you. He says it is urgent." Eleanor's pulse skipped. Urgent? From the village? Who could? Her fingers trembled as she accepted the note he handed her. The seal was crude, pressed with a mark she did not recognize. She tore it open. The message was brief, but its meaning sank like a stone into her chest. "I know what you do at night. Be careful." Her hands shook, and she dropped the note. The parchment fell to the floor like a warning, its words burning in her mind. Someone knew. Someone had been watching. She clutched the edge of the table, struggling to steady her racing heart. Her carefully controlled life was unraveling. Her affair, once thrilling and secret, had now become a dangerous game of survival. That evening, Eleanor met William in their usual hiding place. She showed him the note, her voice trembling. Someone knows, William. They are watching us. William's face darkened. We must be more careful, he said firmly. No more meetings outside the manor. We will find another way. But Eleanor knew it was not enough. The threat was real, and it was closer than they could see. Every step she took, every glance she made, could be observed. The walls that had once offered safety were now cages, trapping her in a web of desire and danger. As she lay awake that night, listening to the quiet creaks of the manor, Eleanor realized something terrible. The price of love was no longer only secrecy. It was fear, and fear had a way of growing until it consumed everything. Eleanor's days became a careful dance of deception. She laughed and dined with Thomas, oversaw the household, and yet every word, every gesture was calculated. Her life had become a mask so convincing even she began to forget who she truly was. Letters from William were now hidden in the folds of her gowns, scribbled in tiny, hurried handwriting. Every message was a spark, a reminder that her heart belonged elsewhere, even as her body walked beside her husband in polite obedience. But the note from the village had changed everything. Eleanor noticed subtle shifts. The stable boy who lingered too long near the garden gate, the cook who stared with suspicion when she passed, the flicker of a stranger's gaze through the high windows. Someone was watching her, studying her movements, waiting for a misstep. One evening, Thomas spoke in a tone unusually cold, almost distant. "Eleanor," he said, eyes piercing. "You seem restless. Is something troubling you?" Her throat tightened. She forced a calm smile. "No, my lord. Only the day's burdens weigh heavy." Thomas nodded slowly, but the shadows in his eyes unsettled her. She realized, with a creeping dread, that suspicion had entered the house. Her careful lies were no longer enough. Each secret meeting, each hidden glance, each letter from William had built a web, and now someone was tugging at it. That night, Eleanor lay awake, listening to the manor's silence. Her pulse raced. She imagined shadows slipping past the tapestries, ears straining for whispered words, eyes watching from the dark corners. Every sound became a threat, every creak a warning. She touched the folded letter beneath her pillow, her hands trembling. William's love was a fire she could not extinguish, yet it threatened to burn everything she had built. The thrill of passion had become a weapon pointed at her heart. And somewhere in the night, Eleanor felt a presence. A certainty that someone in the manor, or just beyond its walls, knew her secret. Her breath caught. The game had changed. The next evening, Eleanor waited in the shadows of the garden, her pulse hammering in her ears. William arrived as promised, his face bright with desire, but the tension in Eleanor's shoulders betrayed her fear. "We must be careful," she whispered, glancing toward the manor. "I feel them watching us." William's jaw tightened. "I will not be stopped," he said, taking her hand. "If they interfere, we face them together." Eleanor wanted to believe him, but a chill ran down her spine. Something had shifted. Someone knew their secret, someone who would not hesitate to destroy them. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, moving silently along the hedges. Eleanor gasped and stepped back. The shadow resolved into a man, older than William, his face twisted in anger and suspicion. "You," Eleanor whispered. The man's voice was low, venomous. "I have seen enough. Your games end tonight." William moved in front of her, protectively, but Eleanor's mind raced. The man had been following her, watching her, perhaps waiting for this exact moment. Her pulse thudded violently. "You will ruin everything," the man said, his eyes burning. "You will bring shame to the manor, to your husband, to yourself." Eleanor's breath caught. Shame, scandal, punishment. These were the stakes of her forbidden desire, and now they were no longer abstract threats. They were here, alive, demanding a reckoning. William grabbed her hand, whispering urgently, "Run with me, Eleanor, now." Her heart was torn between duty and desire, fear and longing. The night air pressed against her like a living thing, and Eleanor knew that the choice she made in the next heartbeat would change everything. Forever. And in the shadows, the watcher smiled, certain that the trap had finally closed. Eleanor's legs moved before her mind could catch up. William pulled her through the garden, their hands clasped tightly as the cold night pressed against them. The man from the hedge, her secret watcher, shouted something she could not hear over the pounding of her own heart. Branches tore at her gown, thorns pricked her skin, but she did not care. Every step away from the manor was a step toward freedom or ruin. William guided her through the darkened woods, where moonlight barely pierced the canopy, and Eleanor felt the thrill of forbidden flight mingled with the sharp sting of fear. "We cannot stop," William urged, voice low but firm. "They will come for us if we linger." Eleanor nodded, though dread gnawed at her. The manor, with its stone walls and flickering candles, felt like a world she had left behind, but one she might never truly escape. She thought of Thomas, of the life she had lived, of the reputation she might lose, and her chest tightened with a bitter ache. Behind them, the man's voice grew louder, furious, a promise of retribution echoing through the trees. Eleanor dared a glance back. Shadows twisted in the darkness, moving with a certainty that terrified her. They were being followed. A sudden snap of a branch made her stumble. William caught her before she fell, their faces inches apart. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his eyes shining in the dim light. Eleanor swallowed hard. Trust or foolishness? She had no choice but to answer. "I trust you," she whispered. They ran until the moon dipped low, until the manor was just a silhouette behind the hills. But Eleanor knew the danger had not passed. The watcher, the villagers, Thomas, any one of them could strike at any moment. Their love had carried them through the night, but the dawn promised reckoning. And Eleanor, heart still racing, realized something chilling. Running was only the beginning. The next morning, Eleanor and William hid in a small cottage on the edge of the forest, far from the manor. The room was dim, smelling of smoke and damp wood, but it was their only sanctuary. Eleanor pressed her hands to her face, trembling. "We cannot stay here forever," she whispered, voice tight with fear. "Someone will come for us." William paced the small space, anger and frustration etched across his face. "Let them come. Let the world judge us. I will not live another day without you." Eleanor felt a pang of longing and terror. She had chased passion into the night, and now it had brought them to this fragile, precarious hiding place. She could not forget the shadows, the eyes that had followed her, the man who had threatened her. Each moment of desire had drawn them closer to ruin. Then came a knock at the door, soft, deliberate, familiar. Eleanor's heart froze. William moved toward the door, ready to confront, but she grabbed his arm. "It's them," she whispered. The door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, hooded, face shadowed. Eleanor's breath caught. The watcher from the manor, the man who had known their secret, stood there, eyes cold and calculating. "I warned you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your games have consequences." William stepped forward, but Eleanor held him back. She knew there was no fighting their fate. The man reached into his cloak and pulled out a folded parchment, placing it on the table. Eleanor's hands shook as she unfolded it. It was a letter from Thomas. A single line scrawled in ink. "I know everything. Return at once or face what comes." Eleanor felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her carefully hidden life, her passion, her freedom, all were gone. The chase, the desire, the thrill of stolen moments had led her to this moment. And now there was no turning back. Eleanor and William returned to the manor, their hearts heavy with dread. The gates loomed before them like silent judges, and Eleanor's hands trembled as she pushed them open. Every step through the courtyard felt like a step into a trap. Thomas was waiting in the great hall, candlelight casting long shadows across his stern face. His eyes, once familiar and gentle, were now sharp and unyielding. Eleanor's stomach knotted with fear, and she realized that no amount of charm or pleading could undo what had been done. "You returned," Thomas said, voice cold, precise. "I warned you, Eleanor. You betrayed me, and the manor." Eleanor bowed her head, her heart pounding. Thomas, you love him, he interrupted, the accusation slicing the air. I saw the letters. I know of your meetings in the garden, your night flights. Do not waste words. William stepped forward, but Eleanor put a hand on his chest. No, she said softly. This is my burden. Thomas's gaze softened for a fraction of a moment, but it was gone as quickly as it came. You will face the consequences of your choices, he said, voice like iron. But I am not without mercy. He signaled to the servants, and they stepped forward, carrying a chest. Inside were letters, trinkets, and proof of Eleanor's secret life. Thomas continued, Your affair will be known to no one outside these walls, but you will be confined until you have proven your loyalty once more. You will live under watch and every action will be observed. Fail and the punishment will be severe. Eleanor's heart sank. She had imagined disgrace, exile, even death, but this measured, silent judgment was far worse. Her freedom was gone. Her passion a secret buried beneath the weight of Thomas's control. William's hand found hers one last time. I will wait for you, he whispered, a vow filled with longing and despair. Eleanor nodded, tears blurring her vision. The love that had burned so brightly was now a shadow, a memory, a dangerous secret locked behind stone walls. And as the great doors closed behind her, Eleanor realized that the price of desire was far higher than she had ever imagined. Months passed. Eleanor lived within the manor, yet she was no longer the woman she had once been. The walls that had once sheltered her now felt like a cage, each corner shadowed with the memory of her choices. She moved through the halls with quiet precision, obeying Thomas's rules, yet her heart still ached for William. William never came. His letters, once frequent, ceased entirely, and Eleanor realized that the life they had dreamed of, wild, free, full of stolen nights, had been sacrificed to the weight of reality. The passion that had ignited so brightly now lingered only in memory, a secret flame smoldering in the darkness of her soul. One evening, Thomas found her in the garden, the very garden where her love had once burned like wildfire. He did not speak at first, only watched her as the sun set, painting the hedges gold and crimson. Finally, he said, voice quiet but firm, Eleanor, I will not forget, but I have forgiven what must be forgiven. You have suffered enough. Eleanor turned to him, tears brimming. Forgiveness? She did not know if she could ever forgive herself. Thomas continued, Live your life, Eleanor. Live it within these walls, and perhaps one day the pain will fade. But never forget the cost of desire, for it is heavier than stone. Eleanor sank to her knees, feeling the weight of every secret, every stolen moment, every danger she had ignored. The thrill of passion had been intoxicating, but the price, fear, shame, and loss, was far greater than she had imagined. And in the quiet of the manor, as night fell and the candles flickered, Eleanor understood the cruel truth. Love, when forbidden, could burn brightly, but it always left ashes behind. The manor was silent. The letters were gone. William was gone. And Eleanor, forever changed, was left to walk the halls alone, a lady bound by duty, haunted by the fire of a love that could never be reclaimed. The night whispered around her, and Eleanor knew she had survived, but only just.